Judy Garland's hand was shaking so violently, she couldn't open the pill bottle. Gene Kelly watched from across the rehearsal studio as America's sweetheart fumbled with the cap, her fingers trembling like leaves in a storm, completely unaware that he was witnessing the beginning of her complete breakdown. It was 2:47 a.m. on stage 15 at MGM, and Kelly had no idea he was about to destroy the woman he was trying to help. The pills scattered across the floor when Garland finally got the bottle open. Little white capsules bouncing off the hardwood like fallen stars, each one a desperate attempt to hold together a life that was coming apart at the seams. Garland dropped to her knees, frantically gathering them up, her mascara already starting to streak. "Judy," Kelly's voice cut through the silence. "Are you all right?" She looked up at him with eyes that held more terror than he had ever seen in another human being. But what she said next would haunt Kelly for the rest of his life, and reveal a truth about himself he was never prepared to face. "Jean," she whispered, clutching the pills in her palm. "I can't remember why we are here. What happened in the next 6 minutes would end Judy Garland's career at MGM." But the real tragedy was that Gene Kelly never saw it coming. 3 months earlier, studio executives had been calling Summer Stock the perfect collaboration. Kelly and Garland, two of MGM's biggest stars, reuniting for what promised to be the musical event of 1948. The budget was massive, the expectations were higher, and everyone involved was convinced they were creating magic. But the Judy Garland who showed up for the first rehearsal was not the same woman who had sung Over the Rainbow 9 years earlier. Kelly noticed the changes immediately, but he catastrophically misunderstood what they meant. Garland arrived hours late, sometimes so disoriented she couldn't remember which studio they were using. Her weight fluctuated wildly from week to week. Her legendary perfectionism had transformed into something that looked like barely controlled panic. Most alarming of all, she had started carrying a small leather purse that she guarded like her life depended on it. Kelly assumed it was artistic temperament. He had worked with difficult performers before, and his approach was always the same: maintain professional standards, demand excellence, and never let personal problems interfere with the work. But Judy Garland wasn't being difficult. She was dying slowly in front of everyone, and nobody understood the warning signs. She is not the same performer she used to be, Kelly confided to Stanley Donen after a particularly disastrous rehearsal, where Garland had forgotten a routine they had practiced the day before. "Something is wrong, but I can't figure out what." Donen had been watching the dynamic between Kelly and Garland with growing alarm. "Jane, have you considered that maybe she needs help, not more pressure?" Kelly dismissed the concern with the confidence of someone who had never encountered addiction before. "Judy is a professional. Whatever is bothering her, we will work through it with discipline and focus." It was exactly the wrong approach for someone who was drowning, but Kelly wouldn't realize his mistake until it was far too late. The breaking point began building 3 weeks before that terrible night on stage 15. Garland had been struggling with the choreography for Get Happy, the film's showcase number that was supposed to prove she was still MGM's golden girl. But every day brought new problems that Kelly interpreted as laziness instead of desperation. Garland couldn't maintain her energy through full run-throughs. Her timing, once flawless, was off by beats that seemed to come from nowhere. Her facial expressions, which had always been her secret weapon, looked forced and artificial under the harsh studio lights. Kelly found himself giving the same corrections over and over again, his frustration growing with each repetition. "Judy, you are dropping your shoulder on the turn. The timing needs to be sharper in measures 12 through 16. This is supposed to be joyful. The audience needs to believe you are having the time of your life." Each note was delivered with Kelly's characteristic precision. But what he didn't understand was that every correction felt like confirmation of Garland's deepest fear, that the pills were stealing her talent along with her sanity. But Kelly was about to learn that some corrections can kill. The night everything fell apart started like any other grueling rehearsal session. Garland arrived 2 hours late, clutching her leather purse and mumbling apologies that didn't quite make sense. Kelly was determined to get the Get Happy sequence camera ready before they wrapped for the night. From the top, Kelly called out, setting the tempo with sharp claps. Garland took her position, swaying slightly as if the floor beneath her wasn't entirely stable. The music began, and she launched into the routine with an energy that seemed to come from pharmaceutical sources rather than natural enthusiasm. She made it through the first verse, stumbling only twice. The second verse held together through sheer force of will, but during the bridge, the moment when she was supposed to execute a series of turns that would bring her directly into Kelly's arms, something went catastrophically wrong. Her foot caught on nothing. Her balance disappeared entirely. She stumbled, tried to recover, stumbled again, and then stopped moving altogether. Standing frozen in the center of the studio like a broken doll, Kelly approached her with the patience of someone who still didn't understand what he was witnessing. "It is okay. Judy, let's just take it from measure 24. That is when Garland said the words that would change everything. "I can't remember the steps. Jean, I can't remember anything." Kelly felt the first flutter of real alarm, but his response revealed how completely he had missed the signs of her disintegration. "Of course you can remember. We have done this routine 50 times. Garland shook her head, her eyes filling with tears that had nothing to do with artistic frustration. "No, Jean. I can't remember anything. I can't remember how I got here tonight. I can't remember if I ate today. I can't remember what these pills are supposed to do except make everything feel like it is happening to someone else." The confession hung in the air like a bomb that hadn't exploded yet. Kelly stared at her, finally beginning to understand that this wasn't about choreography or professional standards or artistic temperament. This was about survival. And Judy Garland was losing the fight. "Judy," Kelly said carefully, "what pills are you talking about?" Instead of answering, Garland opened her leather purse and showed him the contents. Bottles and bottles of prescription medications. Each label bearing a different doctor's name, each promising to solve a different problem that the previous pills had created. "The studio doctors give them to me," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Pills to help me sleep. Pills to help me wake up. Pills to help me lose weight. Pills to help me focus, but they don't help. Jean, they just make me feel like I am disappearing." Kelly stared at the pharmaceutical arsenal in her purse and realized he had been choreographing around a woman who was chemically disintegrating. "How long has this been going on?" he asked. Garland laughed bitterly. "How long have I been working for MGM? Because it started the day they told me I needed to lose weight for the Wizard of Oz. I was 16. Jean, I have been taking pills for 10 years. The revelation hit Kelly like a physical blow. For months, he had been pushing a woman who was fighting a battle he couldn't even see, demanding perfection from someone who was using all her strength just to remain conscious. But the worst was yet to come. "Judy," Kelly said, trying to find words that might bridge the gap between his world and hers. "Why didn't you tell me you were struggling?" Her response would haunt him forever. "Because I was terrified you would realize I wasn't worth saving." That is when Judy Garland collapsed completely. Not physically, but emotionally. The tears came in waves that seemed to originate somewhere deeper than grief, accompanied by sobs that sounded like they were tearing her apart from the inside. Kelly knelt beside her on the rehearsal studio floor, finally understanding that his pursuit of excellence had become a weapon he was using against someone who was already wounded beyond his comprehension. "I have been trying so hard to be what you need me to be," Garland cried, her words barely intelligible through the tears. "But I can't be Judy Garland anymore. Jean, I don't know who that person is when she is not performing, and I don't know who I am when I can't perform." Kelly felt something break inside his chest. Not just sympathy, but a terrible recognition of his own role in her destruction. "You don't need to be anyone except yourself," he said quietly. "But myself is broken." Garland looked at him with devastating clarity. "Myself takes pills to function, and still can't remember choreography. Myself cries in bathroom stalls between takes. Myself is 26 years old and feels like she is already dead inside." The words created a silence that seemed to last forever. Kelly realized that everything he thought he knew about working with performers, about demanding excellence, about the relationship between art and personal struggle, was completely wrong. when applied to someone fighting an addiction they never chose. "Judy," Kelly said slowly, "I didn't know. If I had known, you would have what?" She interrupted. "Been gentler with me. Asked for less. Treated me like I was fragile." "Yes," Kelly said without hesitation. "Judy," he said, "what do you need from me right now?" She wiped her eyes with the back of her hand, smearing her makeup across her cheek. "I need you to know that I am not lazy when I can't remember steps. I am not unprofessional when I am late. I am not being difficult when I ask for breaks. I am just trying to survive something that is bigger than both of us." Kelly sat down on the floor beside her, abandoning his role as choreographer, and simply being present with someone who was in unimaginable pain. "Then let's figure out how to make this work for who you are right now, not who you used to be." Over the next month, Kelly completely restructured his approach to working with Garland. Instead of demanding technical perfection, he focused on capturing whatever authentic emotion she could access, instead of correcting every mistake. He learned to recognize which errors actually served the story better than flawless execution. Most importantly, he learned to work around her medication schedule, understanding that there were times when she was capable of complex choreography, and times when the best they could hope for was emotional honesty. The Get Happy number they eventually filmed became one of the most celebrated sequences in both their careers, not because it was technically perfect, but because it captured something real and vulnerable that audiences had never seen from Garland before. But the real transformation happened in Kelly himself. That night on the rehearsal studio floor taught him that his role as a collaborator wasn't to mold other performers into his vision of excellence. It was to create conditions where they could access their own authentic expression, regardless of what personal battles they were fighting behind the scenes. Years later, when Kelly worked with other performers who were struggling with addiction, depression, or personal trauma, he would remember the sight of Judy Garland's pill bottles scattered across the studio floor and adjust his approach accordingly. He learned to recognize the difference between someone who needed more discipline and someone who needed more compassion. He learned that the most powerful performances often came from places of vulnerability rather than strength. He learned that sometimes the greatest act of artistic leadership was simply creating space for another person to be human. The night Gene Kelly made Judy Garland cry became the night he learned that true excellence wasn't about eliminating weakness. It was about finding ways to transform struggle into art. Garland continued to battle addiction for the rest of her life, but she also continued to create moments of transcendent performance that moved audiences precisely because they contained her pain as well as her joy. The vulnerability that Kelly learned to work with, rather than against, became one of her greatest artistic assets, and Kelly continued to pursue perfection in his work, but with a deeper understanding that perfection could look different for different people fighting different battles at different moments in their lives. The breakdown in the rehearsal studio was never discussed publicly by either performer, but those who worked with Kelly in later years noticed profound changes in his approach. More patience with struggling performers, more willingness to adapt his vision to accommodate human limitations, more recognition that the most important thing a director could do was create safety for artists to be vulnerable. In the end, the night Gene Kelly made Judy Garland cry became the night he learned to see his collaborators not as instruments to be tuned to his specifications, but as fellow human beings deserving of the same compassion he hoped to receive when he was struggling to live up to impossible standards. That lesson, that sometimes the most important thing you can do for another artist is simply witness their pain and offer acceptance instead of correction, would influence every mentorship, every collaboration, every moment when Kelly had the power to either wound or heal another performer. The tears Judy Garland shed on that rehearsal studio floor were not just expressions of her own breaking point, they were the beginning of Gene Kelly's education in the difference between demanding greatness and nurturing it, between pushing people toward excellence and creating space for them to discover what excellence looked like when filtered through their own struggles and limitations. In the end, that may have been the most important choreography of Kelly's career. Not the steps he created for the screen, but the emotional space he learned to create for broken, struggling, magnificently human artists who trusted him with their vulnerability. The dance that mattered most wasn't the one they performed for the cameras. It was the one that happened in the silence after Garland's confession. When Kelly chose understanding over judgment and discovered that sometimes the most beautiful performances emerge, not despite our struggles, but because of our courage to transform those struggles into art. That, perhaps, was the most revolutionary movement of all. The moment when one artist learned to see another, not as a reflection of professional standards, but as a human being whose battles were just as real and just as worthy of respect as their talent.